All righty, so we're going to go ahead and get going today. So hello everybody, welcome. So glad to see everybody here today, and happy sunny Saturday. I want to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And our first item of business, and I want to make sure everybody understands where we're at. I'm going to do a little introduction. We've been without a vice president, and I now have a wonderful candidate who the board has approved, Trupti. Trupti, I want you to go ahead and do a little introduction just so that we can hear from you, and maybe we can take a couple of questions here and there, but why don't you go ahead and fill people in a little bit and tell us about where you live and how active you are, because I know you're very active.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity, and welcome everyone, and thanks for spending the time here. I wrote a couple of things down, so if I look like I'm looking elsewhere, I'm probably just looking at my notes. But I moved into Sunnyside almost 6 years ago, and one of the first things I did was to start attending their zoning and planning, because there's a lot going on in Sunnyside, still is, and I was very interested in what's happening in my community. So, you know, as a resident, I began attending those monthly calls, and I became active. You know, I raised my hand when they were looking for volunteers. A couple of things that I worked on while I was a resident was I helped petition RTD to have their, I believe it's the Beeline, stop at 41st and Fox, because it was not planning to do that, but the community and a lot of the developers who are going to be, you know, having large stakes in that area, in the transit-oriented development area, were interested. So I, you know, took signatures, encouraged people to write to RTD board, set up calls between our RTD representative and the neighborhood to answer questions. So that was one of the first things. And a couple of years later, after they opened and G-Line opened, they did actually put that stop in. So hopefully I helped with that, and hopefully people are enjoying that. Another thing I got involved in was the Globeville drainage study. So Globeville gets flooded because of our topography, and really it's all the surrounding neighborhoods that drain into Globeville, Platte, all that. So there was a maybe 2-year study led by OV consultants hired by the city, and the end goal was to have recommendations that went to Mayor Hancock. So I represented Sunnyside United Neighbors as a liaison for that activity. And then in 2017, I went into semi-retirement. By that, I mean I quit my corporate job and decided to do things and get more engaged in the local community. And now that I have the time, so I became treasurer in 2018 for Sunny. And then in 2019, I became their president. And then I served treasurer and president, unfortunately, for a year together while we were recruiting, and we do have one now. But during my time with as president, I spent time really understanding all the functions and really trying to understand R&O, their challenges, getting to know the surrounding R&Os, and I've been active in fundraising, membership, marketing, communications, kind of everything, because I'm a kind of grounds up kind of person, so I kind of like to know everything that's going on, and also as a way for me to train and recruit and speak from experience, that if somebody was coming on, what kind of time it would take. So I really have enjoyed my time doing that, and last year I got Sunny to also become an Inc. member. I think their membership had lapsed, and since then I've been, you know, active as a delegate with Inc. as well. And more recently, I was outreached to consider this opportunity, and I thought I had the time and the energy to bring that to this group here. So I'm hoping to be able to do some of the things that Inc. needs, and whatever improvements that the board and the agenda is for the coming year.
I have to unmute myself. Thanks, Trupti. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I was excited because I think that Trupti is good about engaging. Yes, I see a clap of hands. You know, we're trying to represent, you know, the entire city, and I think it's a part of the city that we don't have, you know, a lot of representation. I don't think we've had it. I don't know if we've had anybody from Sunnyside on the board before, but you know, I'm happy to see she's engaged and she's very motivated to work with us, and I'm excited that we're going to move forward. So so I don't know if there are any questions. I see a hand. Jason, do you want to unmute and ask a question?
Hi, I don't really have a question. I just want to second. Well, I'm Trupti's neighbor to the north in Chafee Park, and I've worked with her many times, and she brings such a great energy and engagement to everything she does down in Sunnyside, and she's a joy to work with for us. So I think that y'all have made a really good choice with her for your vice president. So I just wanted to hop in and sing her praises a little bit.
Okay, second the motion, right? Is that what you said? Okay,
exactly.
Okay, awesome, great. Well, we have a really packed agenda today, so I don't see any other questions. So I think what I might do is go ahead and, Maggie, I'm going to rely on you to get the poll out. What we're going to do is do a poll. Here's the poll. You have the opportunity to vote. Yes, no, abstain, okay? If you were on the phone and only on the phone, I'm going to ask you to text me. So I probably won't know who it is texting me, so text me. My number, 303-520-4945. Again, 303-520-4945. Thank you. We'll give you I guess you have 49 seconds to vote.
Hurry, people.
Was there a question, Mary Jane or Gandalvo? Is there a question? I see hands raised. Okay, if I don't hear anything, you'll have to unmute.
Yeah, it looks like Jane is saying yes, but cannot get raise hand to work. Maybe she has a question.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No, Loretta, are we voting?
Okay. Thank you.
Well, what's the answer?
Okay, we're getting a little reverb there. If you want to mute again, I don't know who that is. All right. We'll take a couple more. I think we're pretty close. So if there's anybody else who still needs to vote, and I'm not receiving any text, but you know, feel free to. We'll give you just a few more seconds on that. And while you're still voting, I just want to go over one thing if you haven't voted yet, but I just want to say today we have a lot of ballot issues, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that, you know, part of what INC does is we're here to educate, and as such, we have presenters who may have a position, but we're not taking a formal position on those issues. We don't have negative side. I mean, we didn't have time to pull people who might be on the negative side of whatever the topics are. So we want to make sure people know that the topics are, you know, are presented by people who may be promoting that topic. But we want you to know that it's here for information. And I want everybody to know, if you please look at the INC website, there's information with our partners at Denver Decides and League of Women Voters. They have both the pros and cons, and it's pretty interesting this year. New thing this year is if they don't have someone, and thanks to Amy, if they don't have someone who as you know, on the opposite side of an issue or candidate, then they're going to debate some of those issues, and it's going to be middle school and high school kids. So it'll be pretty interesting. Okay, so look for that. the list of the times and the dates, they're coming up quickly. It's, I think, less than 2 weeks. So please look at that. All right, so I think we'll go ahead and end the poll. It looks like 80% of the people have voted. And it looks like we have, just for the record, we have 40 votes, 91% said yes, and four votes abstained. So we have a new vice president. So everybody, thank you so much. And I'm so glad we have someone on board. All right. All righty, so there's the results. And I'm going to go ahead and drop that down. All righty, so our first, and it's very exciting. So we have our really newly engaged Climate and Sustainability Committee. So if you haven't been a part of it and you want to engage, you know, the thing is to contact, you can look on the website for when the meetings are, but Jane, you know, and Parry, I saw, there's Parry. Then, you know, go ahead, and if you want to go ahead and present a little bit about the committee, and then move on into the resolution. Thanks.
Thank you, Loretta, and congratulations, Trupti. Welcome aboard. Happy to have you as a part of the executive committee. We're trying to pick up where Ernie left off with a group concerned with the climate right now. And as we've seen with the dramatic weather changes that have happened here, it's pretty obvious that action needs to happen sooner than later. And fortunately, we have a really good presenter this morning. And I want to thank my co-chair, Parry Burnap, who has really taken the lead on all of this and getting us to go forward. Our speaker this morning is Sebastian Andrews. He will give our presentation. Sebastian has grown up in Congress Park, graduating from the Denver School of the Arts with a concentration in piano. He is the former co-president of the Youth Sustainability Board, a nonprofit that he co-founded to promote environmental sustainability initiatives throughout Denver high schools. Sebastian sat on the 2020 Denver Climate Action Task Force, along with 24 other residents dedicated to designing bold climate action policy for the next decade. Sebastian deferred his attendance at Stanford University to fall of 2021 to wait out the pandemic and to pursue opportunities that came out of the task force, such as campaigning for Proposition 2A. So Sebastian, I turn the microphone over to you in your presentation.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Jane. I really appreciate it. I'd like to thank everyone here too today for coming here again on a Saturday morning and listening to us present our cause. I did not know there would be this much turnout. This is incredible. Now, Maggie, if I could get up my presentation, that would be awesome.
If you want to send it to me, I could share it. I don't know if you, and
That works, or I could my screen as well. It's up to you.
Yeah, you could go ahead, and if you want to do it on your screen, you should be able to. Go ahead now.
Perfect.
You're a co-host, so you're fine. You can do it.
Awesome, thank you. Let's see. How's that for everyone? Awesome. So today I'm going to tell you about Proposition 2A, and the proposition itself actually has a pretty long history of organizations that have preceded it and have fought for similar forms of it. But really, as kind of the tagline says here, really what it is, it's ensuring bold climate action for the city we all really know and love. So the truth about the climate crisis is it's no longer far off. It's no longer way in the future like scientists have told us in the past. It's actually happening right now, right in our backyard. As Jane said, with extreme weather events across Colorado, with wildfires raging, with the 2019 bomb cyclone that was more pronounced due to climate change, with the 2013 floods that swept our state. It's just true that the climate crisis is affecting all of us in one way or the other, and obviously some more than others. So the good thing is Denver came up with a really robust solution to tackle climate change for basically the next decade. So the 2020 Denver Climate Action Task Force was a really diverse crew, as you can see on the right here. It was full of environmental groups, energy groups, representatives of real estate, of small business, of youth, of people of color representative groups. It was really across the board, and really what it was a 6-month public input and policy design process, and it was really grounded in equity and inclusion. In fact, 2 of our 14 meetings were specifically devoted towards equity training. And as I said, it's a really diverse group of residents, and all of these residents came together over the course of 6 months and produced a 106-page report, a recommendations report, with 336 specific policy solutions to tackle the climate crisis through the year 2030. Now, this is the most staggering figure of this presentation, which is that the cost of inaction we calculated to be over the next 20 years, if we don't do anything for the next 20 years, it will cost our city $20 billion in expenses related to the harms of climate change. However, the task force solutions that we came up with and the policy recommendations that we have require $1 to $3 billion in revenue. So you're talking about, let's call it right in the middle. If it's $2 billion, the task force solutions end up being worth over the next 20 years, you're paying a tenth of what the possible cost of inaction is. So really, it's a down payment. It's an investment on a solution that will get us to a much more sustainable and resilient city in the face of the climate crisis. So 2A itself applies directly within the city and county of Denver, and it was referred by city council to the local ballot by an 11-to-1 vote. It was recommended by the task force over several other revenue options, mainly because it applies to everyone. It's very broad based. It's able to generate, we think in the first few years, over $40 million in revenue, and it's only 2.5 cents on a $10 purchase, meaning it's a 0.25% sales tax increase. It's a very minute amount, and it should only cost families a minuscule amount per month and per year. And the tax also has the same exemptions that sales taxes already do within the city and county of Denver, applying to food, fuel, Watterson, Edison, and feminine hygiene products. So who's behind 2A? Basically, 2A itself is the ballot measure, but backing it is a range of organizations already. And I am even realizing that this group right here of organizations is not even complete. We have Wind and Solar Denver, the Colorado COPERG, the Sierra Club has endorsed the measure, taking neighborhood health to heart, which I know some of you are involved in. Bicycle Colorado has endorsed us, as well as the individuals you can see on the right here. So what we're basically doing with supporting this ballot measure is we're just ensuring the task force recommendations are well funded. Because the task force recommendations, we have a lot of tools, as we realize over the 6 months, we have a lot of specific policy tools that we can use to get to where we need to be. The way that we actually ensure equity and ensure that everybody can participate in these solutions is if we raise the money to do so and infuse subsidies and equities for the solutions, or subsidies and incentives for the solutions that we've posed. And so with grassroots support, what we're doing is trying to really recruit RNOs, recruit bids, recruit nonprofits, groups, organizations, businesses, etc., all to get Denver in line to vote a yes on Proposition 2A. So where will the funds go actually from 2A? So this is actually the first phase 1 of the task force recommendation report, which means it's going to start right if we get the funding on January 1st of 2021. This is going to be where the funds will go until 2023, as that's in phase 1. First of all, you can basically see it breaks down into these 5 categories here: buildings, electricity supply, transportation, waste and consumption, resiliency and adaptation. And actually, after this presentation, I'll throw the link to the actual task force report in the chat, just in case anybody wants to go take a look at it and hasn't already done so. And just a quick note here, you can see transportation is the largest category because it requires a lot of infrastructure changes to mitigate our carbon impact, as well as adapt to some of the extreme weather and changing weather events of the climate crisis. And then really important to note here is that 50% of all the funds, this is in the bill, 50% of all the funds generated by the sales tax increase will be invested directly in community with a strong lens toward equity and racial justice. So who will manage and oversee these programs and this revenue? So first of all, the Climate Action Sales Tax will generate revenue over which the Sustainability Advisory Council will oversee, and the Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency will implement. Now, the office itself was created in 2019 unanimously by City Council to combat this issue and also to form the task force. And then the Sustainability Advisory Council is made up of I think roughly 20 citizens or 20 residents we have here providing oversight to the office itself. So it's really supposed to be the governing body over that mayor's office that then is implementing bold climate action solutions using the revenue from the sales tax. So thank you so much for joining me today and for hearing me out on Proposition 2A. We really hope we can count on INC's support in this measure. We believe that that there's really it's a really rational choice to solve a problem that affects all of us and will really end up costing us if we don't act on it and if we don't let the task force recommendations and what Denver can do to tackle climate change come to fruition. Thank you all so much.
Okay, we have a few questions in the chat. The first question is, how can this speak to equity when it is a regressive sales tax?
I answer that by saying that, you know, it's the clause that I highlighted earlier in my presentation, which is that unlike a lot of other sales taxes, it has a really specific it has a very specific application that has 50% of the fund.
Did we just lose him?
I think so. I can speak to that though. In regard.
Okay, good, because we have a couple more questions and he's suddenly gone.
Yep, happy to help. So in regards to the clause that he's talking about that's in the initiative is the 50%, a prioritization of 50% of the funds go towards working towards equity, race, and social justice. There's also a plan that there will be much more community engagement, and that will also happen through the Sustainability Advisory Council, in that they're building out the committees that are part of that. There currently, I believe there's 28 members of the Sustainability Assistance Committee. It's going to be reduced or to Advisory Council to 13, but then they're going to create 6 different groups that are part of that will then have 20 members of that as well. So that's going to actually build out the amount of community involvement that there is in advising where these funds are going. And if you look at the solutions that are part of the task force report, I think Sebastian mentioned this, there's a really strong equity lens on every piece that there is there, and that the goal is that everything that the city does working towards sustainability and climate action all has that equity lens on it moving forward.
Okay, so next question is, and it sounds like, you know, you tried to involve a lot of, you know, communities of color, but again, and the term a strong lens of equity means what in practice is the question. What does that mean?
I think really what it means is a lot of community engagement. Instead of going into communities and telling them what they need, going in and actually talking with communities and finding out what it is that they want to happen within their community. I think it also means focusing on those communities that we know have been disproportionately affected by pollution and climate change over the years. The GES neighborhoods, Montbello, Westwood, Sunnyside, and making sure that we're really engaging those communities moving forward.
Okay. I think we have at least another question. Let me see. There's a lot of questions. And this is a big one, so I don't think we can even touch on it. Especially for a lot of communities in the city of Denver, it's how does racial justice fit with climate change, or did I misunderstand that? If somebody can provide a link and maybe we put that on the website or email it to people, because I think that's a big issue. But if you want to speak to it quickly, that would help.
I'll keep it quick. There's the intersectionality of everything that goes on, from systemic racism to how we have really, it's such a big question to do it small. But what we have to look at is that racial justice and environmental justice go hand in hand. And these communities where we've seen systemic racism have been impacted more than any other communities within the city. So we really have to focus on these communities in order to build them up and make them whole so that they are able to address the issues that are going to come with climate change.
Okay, and Ian, I appreciate that you're answering questions. If all of you can look at the chat link, and then Maggie, if we can save the chat link, that goes to everyone for later, so people could see the links if we have it. So can you please answer all questions via, and Thomas, maybe you're good with that. Maybe you can do that, because I know there's a few more questions and I don't want to cut it off, but I know we have another presenter that I want to get in, and people are on a time frame that are coming up. So Parry, do you want to go ahead and introduce who's the next person?
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. I just want to call up on Frank Locantore, Delegate, small business advocate, and a really active member of this task force. He had a few comments he was going to share from his perspective.
Thanks, Parry, and thanks, INC. Really quickly, I appreciate giving the time. I'm Frank Locantore. I'm the executive director for the Colfax Ave bid that spans from the state capitol to the Carla Madison Rec Center at Josephine. I'm also an INC delegate, and I've been doing this for about 5 years. Prior to working with the bid, I was in the environmental nonprofit world for 25 years, and my first work in Colorado, in fact, in 1992, was organizing to fight global warming. That's how we used to call it. And in the last 15 years of my environmental work, I was with a national nonprofit called Green America, and we used economic strategies in a variety of different program areas. My program area was to protect forests, and we did that, I did that by working with the magazine industry to begin using recycled paper. And it took me about 10 years just to get National Geographic magazine to begin using recycled paper. Now, I can't speak for all businesses because they're quite divergent, but I'm going to give you some generalities. They get climate. We all get, most people in the world get climate. Not all, we know that, but most people get it, and the businesses are no exception. They want to help, but if you talk to them, they'll cite time and time again about how the pro-environmental or the pro-climate action thing that they could do is more complicated, more time-consuming, and more costly than the normal course of business. And it's easy to say, like, oh, well, you just got to do You just got to do it. You just got to, stand up and do it. And that's fine. You can say that, but I think you also have to understand that these small business owners are, working 18 hours a day. And so spending more time is spending more money. And when they're following the standard practices, they're standard practices, a lot of times because they're the practices that have been done for decades. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best environmental practices that we need today and in this current context. So if a business owner wants to deviate from the standard practice, they need to apply for, ask permission, or ask for a variance in order to do something differently. And that includes doing the pro-environment or the pro-climate thing. So doing extra work to do something different in this case, the environmentally preferable alternative means that they're spending more time and spending more money. And so we're making it more difficult to do the right thing. And this is the paradigm that we've created for the most part over the last 100 years. So the question right now for us as the world and our smaller segment of it here in Denver is, how can we, flip that paradigm? How can we make doing the right thing, the right environmental thing, the right climate action thing be the standard and be the easier thing to do and the no-brainer thing to do, as opposed to finding a different path in order to make it work for your business? So we need to just kind of figure out how that the business and the climate and environmental ROI sync together. And the city can really help, make that happen. Now, I bring this up because the sales tax is one piece of the puzzle. It's a necessary, but it's not a sufficient source of the funding for the climate crisis. We all know that. And just, my little take on the sales tax is, for the most part, the task force, none of us were really all that excited about the sales tax. And we looked at a lot of other different funding mechanisms, but for various reasons, none of them would work right now today in 2020.
Okay,
and
I'm gonna stop you for a second, just because you can just take 50 seconds and do it, because we need to get the poll going. So if you can just wrap it up really quickly, that'd be great.
That's fine. That was basically where I was going. Is we need the sales tax. We need a different paradigm on there, and so it's definitely an encouragement to be voting for the initiative.
Okay, thank you very much. Parry, Jane.
I guess I would just say I've been working on this issue since the late 80s. It is time, and it's going to be all of us as individuals, neighbors, the city of Denver, our state, the federal government. We have to work together now. We are out of time.
Do we, and then do you want to talk about the resolution?
Before we do that, I would like to just let everybody know that there will be 5 more opportunities to see this kind of a briefing. We'll get it up on the INC webpage, but we're going to have briefings on October 3rd, the 7th, and the 15th, both in the morning and the evening on the weekdays. So it will have an opportunity to get more people to ask questions and see the presentation. And again, I want to thank my committee, and I really want to thank Sebastian this morning. He did a great job, and what a wonderful youth leader we have in him. And if, there's no action that is ever taken that's perfect for everything. This is a really good start. It'll get Denver some money. It'll get money to the organizations that can really implement some things quickly and look at the long range. So thank you for this opportunity, INC, and let's go forward to approving the resolution.
All right, do you have the resolution to share, or?
It went out, you sent it out, right?
It was sent out, and it is on, I'm fairly sure it's on the website. Let me go back and see if I have it.
It is on the website, and it was sent out.
Okay, and
it was sent out with the final agenda and Zoom link on the 12th.
I'm trying to see if I have it saved. All right. Does anybody need us to, go over it again, or is everyone okay with voting on the resolution right now? And maybe you want to just talk about it quickly, Parry or Jane.
I'm happy to talk about it. There's a group called Climate Action Denver, an outgrowth of Resilient Denver, who got this whole movement started a year or so ago. This is a resolution that's been supported by the organizations that Sebastian referenced. Inc. is a very powerful and important voice in the fabric of our community. And so Climate Action Denver has asked that Inc. support this resolution. It's a long one. You know, it begins with acknowledging the crisis, and it ends with saying that COVID has shown us that these kinds of disruptive upheavals are felt so acutely at the neighborhood level, and also the solutions, the innovations come from the neighborhood level, and people are required to support state and city work too. So Loretta, are you thinking we should read this, or?
We don't really have time, so
Yeah.
I'd like to make sure that everybody had the opportunity to read it. If you don't go to the web right now, it was sent out, so and I want to make sure that everybody knows you have to be a delegate to vote, okay? So, and I don't know that everybody put the little D by their name, but hopefully you have. If you are by phone and only by phone, please text me if you can. My phone number is 303-520-4945. Can we put the
Hey Loretta, I'm going to email you the resolution so you can copy paste it. For some reason I cannot.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second? Trupti, are you seconding?
Second, thank you.
Okay. I have a second by Trupti.
Who's the first? Who's the first, please?
Who moved it?
The motion.
Did anybody, and I'm sorry, I can't see everyone or hear everyone. Did anybody move to approve the motion?
I will move to approve the
Jane?
motion. Yes.
Okay, Jane Potts. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and call the question. And why don't we go ahead and, okay. It's in a, not the, well, thank you, Blair, so much. I'm going to try and share.
It doesn't absorb the formatting for some reason, but.
I know, it didn't do it. So I'm going to share this screen, but you all can look at it very quickly. Oh, it has all my emails. Sorry about that, but I'm going to try and make that bigger, which it's not very big, but so if you have the opportunity to read through it, and for those of you on the phone, I say, you know, please go to INC website and look at the, you know, the resolution in its prettier format.
Loretta, I'm not seeing that poll any longer.
Oh no.
I never saw a poll.
Yeah.
We haven't put it up, but it should be attached to the Zoom. But Maggie, are you saying it's not on there?
It's not showing.
I haven't seen it either.
I also don't have this, who's second? I have Jane making the motion and.
Trupti.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. I think we'll have to do a Survey Monkey then. Can we do that, Maggie?
Right now?
No. We'd have to do it like afterward. I don't think you'd want to do it right
Yeah,
now.
we can do it that way.
And then I think I'm going to let everybody know we'll go ahead and close it by Monday.
Yes.
Okay, that will give enough time. Unfortunately, we can't vote today unless we did a show of hands. And
Loretta,
yes.
if the screen is clear, then the poll will come back up. If you
Oh,
take
it
the
will?
resolution
Okay.
off.
Okay.
I
Is everybody
think.
okay? Are you okay with me taking away? If anybody wants me to leave it on longer, let me know. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing.
Loretta, just one last moment. Once again, I'd like to point out that edit in the last sentence. It would be good to correct that before we record this or pass it on to anybody.
And what was the correction?
The last whereas, I don't see it right now, but it says to have.
Oh.
Steve, it was changed in the document. I just think the one that Loretta put up was one that hadn't been changed, but it's been changed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. All right, great. Okay, good. All right, so, and I'm going to ask you, Maggie, can you get the poll back now or not?
No.
Okay, so it's just
only showing the first poll.
Okay, so we could do a show of hands, and those of you just on the phone. Does everybody know how to go to, when you go to, down below, if you go to, well, I can't even show it. I think if you go to participants and then it shows you can vote and you can, I think, and I can't remember what it says. Can anybody do that and say what it says?
It says raise hand.
Yeah.
Raise hand.
And you
So-
click on that.
Yeah, if we
So
could
blue
click on
hand.
the raise hands and we'll all try and vote that way. That might be the quickest way to get it. Everybody understand how to do that? Okay, great. And I just want to make sure that you've all read the resolution and had an opportunity. Like I said, we didn't have anybody on the opposing side, but I think there were some pointed questions and some helpful. So,
Are you calling for a yes vote right now?
I'm calling for, why don't those of you who are voting yes, please raise your hands. Or if you need to text me, please text me at 303-520-4945. All right.
You want us to raise our hands on Zoom, right? Not
hand raising, but
hand raising, but on the clicking.
I'll tell you if you can click, what it does is it tells me how many people have voted yes. So if you can do that, and if not, chime in and let me know that you don't know how to do it and you couldn't get it on. So let me know.
25 yeses in the chat.
26.
Okay. And if you've done it correctly, it will it will say lower hand. So like I haven't hit the lower hand until this poll is done. So keep your hand raised.
The hand raise is under reactions, I believe. If you can't.
No, the one she's talking about is under participants.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, go to participants, and on the lower right side will be raise hand. And once you've done that, it will say lower hand. Keep your hand raised until she tells us we're good.
Do we know how many delegates are present so we know how to manage the vote?
I don't know how many delegates right now, but I know there are 67 participants. We know a few are not delegates. So right now we have 2. I've gotten a call. Sorry, I had to take a call. That was a vote from Inspiration Point. Thank you very much. And then I also had a text. So I have 2 more yeses. Okay. So right now I have 29 yeses. Tell me, Blair, if that's what you have.
I had 27 with your 2. But you got a call. So, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm still missing. Oh, maybe I can't. I'm not counting Maggie because I can't see her.
Well, it says 27.
I can't vote because I'm hosting. So that
Yeah.
takes my stuff away.
But you can go ahead and tell us your vote if you want. You can, whatever. It's up to you. So I have 29 raised hands saying yes. I get the number as a host. It gives me the number. It says 29 have their hands raised. So right now we're at 31 and I'll add 32. So
There's a delegate vote in the chat.
okay. So I'm going to say 32 right now. Go ahead and lower your hands. And I'm going to ask for the no votes. Okay, has everybody lowered your hands? All right, so if you've all lowered your hands, I'm now going to ask for the no votes. And I have 3 so far. I'll give you a couple more seconds. Again, if you vote no, please, I have a few more hands going up. If you vote no, please text me, 303-520-4945. Again, 303-520-4945. Or call. All right, I have the no votes. I have 5 no votes. Okay, if you can lower your hands. Okay, I have 1 call. I have 1 abstention already, so I want abstentions now. I have 2 abstentions. Anybody else abstaining, please vote now. Raise your hand. Any other abstentions? Any other abstentions? So I have 8 abstentions. All right. You can go ahead and lower your hands. So Blair, what was that count again? 32?
I have 32 yeses, 5 noes, 6 abstentions.
Okay. All right. It sounds like the resolution passes. Okay. Thank you all for your votes. Thanks all for the questions. And hopefully if you haven't gotten your questions answered, if people can put links or email addresses of where you can get your questions answered. All right.
Loretta, can I just say one thing? Thank you, everybody, for the vote. Jane and I are hoping that any of you who want to continue to work with the city and monitor and support the city and hold the city accountable moving forward should this pass. That's what our committee is going to be all about, just like the Transportation Committee and Parks and Rec. So that is a wide open door for people who want to stay with this issue.
Okay, great, thank you. We have to move on now. I want to introduce Councilwoman Kniech. Robin Kniech is here, she just joined us. And Dom Barrera, are you there? There he is, yay, okay, great. Unmute, Dom, so that we can hear you.
Yep, hi everyone.
Hi, so I wanna go ahead and we're gonna talk about the homeless tax. And again, just want to repeat that INC is here for information. We want to make sure that everybody knows this is for information purposes. We're saying, you know, you get to choose how you vote on your own, but we're just saying, here's some information about the issue. So please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. I'm dialing in from the mountains of Telluride, and if my connection's poor, I may turn my video off or turn it over to Dom. So good morning, I think, to a few of my colleagues who are here as well, and a few INC folks heard this presentation earlier, but we've got a little more detail since we are now on the ballot. So Dom is going to share a few slides that I'm going to go through, and then hopefully we'll have time for some questions. Why don't really start? I don't think I need to do a lot of case making about the need to INC. You all are very in touch with the increase in homelessness that has been showing both in this survey that we do called the Point in Time, as well as probably your own visual awareness of what's happening in our neighborhoods with folks living unsheltered on the streets. I will say that we've had an increase in people using shelter during the COVID-19 pandemic, because what we've done is we have actually increased our shelters to 24 hours a day, meaning that it's a much lower burden for folks to have to get there at a certain time and stand in line and then have to leave at a certain time and find a place to put their stuff. So we are seeing an increase in shelter usage along with an increase in unsheltered homelessness, both of those. Dom, are you able to share? Do you need permissions? Let me just check in before.
Yeah, I need permission.
Maggie, can you
make Dom a co-host, perhaps?
You can take me off. Okay, good. Okay, there you are. You're on now.
Okay, great. So Dom, I think let's just go to slide 3 real quick. I think one of the biggest challenges in our community right now is a sense of hopelessness, right? Folks who are homeless feel hopeless, that they aren't going to be able to get a path out, and our community sometimes feels like things don't work. One of the things that's challenging about homelessness is our success is invisible. When someone is permanently housed, you will never see them again. And so I want you to know we have models that work. We are seeing 80% success rate of folks we take directly from chronic homelessness on the streets to housing. We're seeing a very high success rate into year 3. So 3 years in, folks are staying housed. We have built thousands of units with the housing fund. Now those are across the homeless spectrum. So we don't have everything we need to focus specifically on homelessness, but the housing fund has made a big impact. But what we are looking for now is to fill the gap on some service dollars for shelter funding and for some other pieces that we don't have enough funding to take to scale. So this is about taking things that we know work and funding them to a greater degree to reach more people. Next slide, Dom. So even though this tax may feel like it came quickly, we have a number of plans that the funds are basically going to be geared towards implementing, and one of those is a 3-year shelter plan, and it includes things just like what I described with our COVID response, which is that making more shelters 24/7 and more person-centered. The better that environment, the better health and housing outcomes, the more willing people are to use that option compared to just a warehouse setting where you go in, sleep, and then have to be out at 5 in the morning. So that plan is already in place, and we'll be working to implement it if these funds pass. Let's go a couple forward to the tax, Dom. So we are looking at a 0.25 cent on a $10 purchase. So the same size. I think I logged in right as you were finishing maybe the climate tax. So this is the same size tax. I will just share with you, in neither case did we pick these as our first choice. We worked through all the possible funding sources that we could go to. We don't have a lot of progressive funding options at the local level in the state of Colorado. I can answer about all the other taxes you may wish we could use that are not allowed to us. But we backed into this tax as the only option that would create this large of an amount of money for homelessness with the least impact on the payers, because it's spread out over the most payers, right? I could charge a fee to get here, but the fee would have to be really great. This is paid by every person who lives, shops in Denver, visitors, everybody contributes, which means it's a little bit of burden spread across a lot of folks. Let's go to the next slide. So we are talking about three things the funds will be used for: housing, shelter, and services. Like other ballot measures you've seen, we don't pre-program every penny. We want to be flexible. For example, we wouldn't have expected to spend so much on shelter this year, but we had a pandemic that required an emergency response because we lost about half our shelter capacity in order to allow people to distance themselves. So that's a great example why we don't write in really rigid dollar amounts for different uses, because we want to be able to respond. If the federal government, for example, all of a sudden decides it loves supportive housing but doesn't fund transitional housing, that's the case right now, we might need our local dollars for transitional housing. So it allows us to be flexible, but to have eligibility that's very broad and has room for new innovations, things we maybe haven't thought of today. Next. So in the short term, these dollars in 2021 would probably be doing a lot of the same things we're doing now, which is keeping shelters open 24 hours a day, allowing distancing, allowing healthcare services. Right now we're using emergency FEMA dollars for that. They are going to run out. They are not going to last forever. But going into 2022 and beyond, a large portion of these dollars would be invested into housing. So we right now, this is just some math you need to follow with me and ask me if you have questions. We have funding for about 1,300 new homes in our current housing fund and a bond that we have with Denver Housing Authority. But not all of those 1,300 homes are for those experiencing homelessness. So these dollars will allow all 1,300 of those homes in that pipeline to be for those leaving homelessness. That includes single folks, families with kids, a full spectrum of people. And it will grow that pipeline by 500 units. So we'll end up with a total of 1,800 homes for those leaving homelessness over about 10 years. We also expect to have 4 to 6 projects that we're calling catalytic projects because they're a little bit different. They're going to combine shelter on the ground floor with housing above and services that can be shared between the two. This is an efficient use of hard to find land. It's an efficient way to share services. It's a way to create a continuum for people. This is something that's hard to do under our current zoning code. Our current zoning code likes to keep everything separate. Shelter is one thing, transitional housing is another. So this is one reason the group living code addresses trying to create some modernization of allowing these uses to be shared on a site for building projects like this. And then next slide. So those are some of the long-term objectives. These do not program every single dollar in the fund though. We will have the same 3 to 5 year planning process that we use now for the housing fund. That is a public process. We send out notices. People get a comment on the draft of how the funds will be used. And then we also do annual plans. The city right now, you could go on the website, denvergov.org/affordable housing, and you could find a what do they call it? Where you report results in real time. Sorry, my morning brain isn't warmed up yet, but that dashboard, the dashboard, you could see how every dollar in the housing fund is being spent right now by going to that site. We would use that same dashboard to report on these dollars in real time, plus these annual and 3 to 5 year plans. And then there's also an advisors group that is appointed by the mayor and council that provides some oversight. They meet with the department at least 6 times a year. They see how they're doing based on their goals. Are they on track? Are they off track? Why? And then that feedback is all in a public meeting. So there's a lot of transparency here. That new host advisors is going to be appointed and start meeting this fall. And it's the first time we've had a group that advises both on housing and homelessness since the department came together. All right, I think we're getting through most of this, and then I want to leave time for questions. So Dom, you want to speak up here and just tell folks how they can get involved?
Yes. So there's a few ways you can help us get involved. One is, as we know that everything is social distance and just being safe, but we're going to have like a texting campaign. There's going to be opportunities to write letters to the editor. There's also other ways you can volunteer. And you can reach out to us on our website, which I'll share in a separate email to the host. But also I'll share my contact information if you directly want to get involved. And then B, once we get yard signs, you know, being able to share those with the, or display them in your yards once we get them out. And then C, just making sure you vote and getting your neighbors to vote on this ballot initiative when it comes up in November.
So we have a few comments, questions in the chat. If you can respond there, and I know we're kind of running behind, I feel bad, I'm sorry, but I think you guys have a lot of links, and I think that would be so helpful if you could put those in the chat, but also if you email them, that would be helpful. But I think putting them in the chat would be helpful. So the one comment was, and I'm sorry, Judy, it's been a while back, but that's interesting. Success being invisible, same with illness prevention, makes for a tough sell. Then the next question is, what is our current tax rate on $10 purchases, please? If climate and this passes, this is 5 cents added. So what do we
I'll
already
put that in the chat.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
But can I answer the Caring for Denver one verbally? That one's going to be harder to do in the chat.
Yeah, please do, please do.
So Caring for Denver, funding for those experiencing homelessness is a component of what's eligible under the Caring for Denver mental health tax, but it's not a set aside. There's no set dollar amount that we can plan on each year. And so I will share a longer answer with what they've invested in that overlaps, but it is going to be a better funding source for one-time innovations that kind of try out new things for a couple of years. It does have some steady dollars coming to the city for co-responders and for the STAR program. These are alternatives to police response to those who are mentally ill on the streets. I would consider those dollars to be an intervention prevention, but they are not the same as steadily funding a program that works every day with the same person, building trust and getting them into housing. And so we believe that there's just not enough funding in Caring for Denver to do the mental health piece by itself, but the two can be complementary. And so I'll put a little bit of detail in there, but I do agree that it is important for them to work together and not duplicate, because that is an important single piece. They also are funding youth, they're funding suicide prevention, they're funding criminal justice. So there are other places where the Caring for Denver dollars hopefully will prevent people from falling into homelessness, while at the same time we need a dedicated source that's for those specifically getting those services.
So Robin, are you talking about, is that the 2018
Yes.
proposition that passed? Okay, because, you know, just wondering if there were similar funds, but thanks for that. And then for Mehmet, how many dollars will come from the police budget?
This is a sales tax, so it's a voter approved tax. We do not, the mayor's proposed budget comes next week. It will, I expect, include a cut to the police department for budget reasons, if nothing else, but we will also have whatever budget discussion during the next 2 months. Unfortunately, we had to decide whether to go to the ballot before we can have a discussion about Denver's budget, and this is too important of an issue. These dollars will be available in perpetuity with this accountability I've described, because this is we have, you know, almost 5,000 people experiencing homelessness in Denver. And so it's going to take us, you know, time to work through and house those folks, while at the same time trying to prevent new people from coming into homelessness if we have a recession for the next year. So I don't believe we could get there to the scale we need by just cutting other programs, especially when those discussions are not yet very clear how they will turn out or how many years they would last for. This is a funding source that would be reliable.
All right, great, thank you. I want to keep the conversation going in the chat, if you guys don't mind staying on. And I know, Robin, that the next few conversations you might want to stay on anyway, since it's dealing with the charter amendments, you know, so I think, is Amanda Sawyer, I think you're on. She's our next presenter on charter amendments. Amanda, or?
I'm here.
Oh, good. Okay, good. I didn't see you. So.
Yeah, hi, I'm here.
Okay, so if anybody else has questions for Dom or for Robin, please put those in the chat. And I think there's at least a couple of questions still in there. So, but Amanda, do you want to go ahead? I know there's, well, I think there's 3 amendments. I don't know if you're talking about all 3 of them, but you're talking about amendments to the charter.
I'm only talking about my biggest one, which is council approval of mayoral appointees. I'm happy to talk about my second one, which is much smaller and a little bit more straightforward, which I can do really briefly right now. But you know, the homelessness tax is really important, and I want to make sure that Councilwoman Kniech has an opportunity to really answer everyone's questions on that first. So I'm happy to wait a few minutes if there are some other questions or discussions that need to happen first. I'm happy to do that. You know, if there's 5 more minutes of discussion that need to happen here. So if we need to do that, I think it's really important that we have this discussion and answer all of those questions. If, you know, we can do that in 5 extra minutes, I can cut 5 minutes off my time.
Okay, there was one question that came up, and I don't know, Robin, I just saw you add something, but it was, is this tied to GLAC, to the group living amendment change, or separate?
It is completely separate. The voters will get to vote on this tax, and then the dollars will be deployed through the Department of Host. So it's got, the only reason I brought up the zoning piece is because right now it's difficult for us to combine shelter and housing and transitional housing on the same site. So the flexibility to be able to use the dollars for some of the services that are needed may be impacted by whether we're able to modernize some of those pieces of the shelter code. But that's, the dollars would be there if the voters approved them regardless of what happens. And again, a good portion of these dollars should go for housing. And those pieces are not affected by the zoning code at this point. They're apartments. They are zoned like apartments. There's no difference. The zoning code does not allow us to treat people differently based on their income or their background if they have a disability. So apartment is an apartment, and so there's no impact. We'd be able to spend those dollars the same under anywhere we can build apartments for those experiencing homelessness, the same as any other apartments.
One other question, and I think we'll end it and keep everything back on the chat and give you, Amanda, a chance. But this question was, Christine says, I hear from people, why should we support this additional tax if we don't see any progress on homelessness?
I would beg to disagree. We have housed probably 10,000 folks with temporary housing, permanent housing since, you know, Denver's Road Home began. What we can't do is prevent necessarily those who are falling into homelessness when we have a housing crisis. But I do, you know, have some information. I don't know that I can share the deck because Dom is sharing, but there is, we've spent $62 million and we've renovated, built 2,700 new homes with those dollars. We've opened 4 new supportive housing projects in Denver, the ones that I mentioned having 80% success rate. So I think that it's all about how you measure. Like I said, the success is invisible. What is not invisible is the people who continue to fall into homelessness because of both income inequality. We see a racial disparity in terms of who's experiencing homelessness because we have racial disparities in the criminal justice system and barriers to housing for those who are especially African American and Native American. So I think you can't measure the success based on the other systemic issues, most of which are national income inequality, racial inequality. We are successfully housing people. We are successfully seeing people use, we have 2,000 people a day using shelter. You don't see most of those folks, especially now that there are no lines to get into shelters because they're open all day. You see those living on the streets, which is our biggest failure, and it is the place we need the biggest intervention. But let's not forget about those 2,000 folks staying warm, staying dry, and those folks working every day to get into housing, many of them directly from the streets. Those are things that are harder for me to show you, and part of my challenge is how to do that during this campaign. So I think it's a great question Christine asks, and we need to think more about how to share that success, even when someone living privately inside is not visible to us in the same way as someone living on a street corner is.
So Hank, do you have a question? No, okay. Adrian, do you have a question? No, okay. I just see hands raised. Okay. Thank you all, and thank you again.
And I have Charter Amendment 2G. I'll stay on for a few minutes if there's questions about it. This is the one allowing council budget authority, but if I have to jump off because I have to check out and my Wi-Fi goes away, I will reach out and I can answer questions. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks. Amanda.
Okay, so thank you for having me. I will run through this really quickly. I know we're running late and we want to catch up. So I have two charter amendments that I'm talking about today, 2E and 2F. I will start with 2F because it's really straightforward. It is about modernizing the charter language. So our charter was written over 100 years ago, right? The first draft was in 1904, updated in 1916, and it has a lot of extremely prescriptive language. So if you look at other charters of other strong mayor systems all over the country, our charter is extremely prescriptive. It's very limited. The wording that we use is very specific. And what that does is it limits a lot of our options. So the charter language that I'm proposing is very simple and very straightforward. It would just allow us to modernize the language, make it more general, so that we can change up some of our open meetings laws in particular to allow for all the way across the city, change our policies for remote meetings in particular. What we found during COVID was that we need to do a better job of providing access for everyone and use technology. And our charter is just so old that, of course, in the early 1900s, we didn't have computers. So we need to be able to modernize the language of the charter so that we can change up some of our policies and procedures to allow for things like remote meetings. And that is what I'm trying to do. So 2F is very simple. It's very straightforward. It doesn't actually change the law in any way right now. It will move with a companion ordinance that keeps the law exactly the same in every way. It just moves it from charter language to ordinance, because charter language requires a vote of the people to change and ordinance requires a vote of council to change. And this way we can just go ahead and change the charter language and change up some of our policies to modernize them so that we can make sure that we're more inclusive of everyone and allow for online meetings and things like that, and just change for technology. So any questions on that? I'll give everyone a minute to see if there's any raised hands or anything in the chat. I know it takes a couple of minutes for people to type things in. I see thumbs up from Judy. Hi, Judy. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Great. Okay. So that is kind of the update on 2F. It's really straightforward. We don't expect any questions on, any pushback on that, any questions on that. The mayor's office is supporting it as well. Everyone in the city would like it to happen. It makes a lot of sense and it's really simple. Second amendment is 2E. This proposed charter amendment was referred unanimously to the ballot by council. And I'm going to just show a presentation to you all if I can get screen sharing, if I'm allowed to share my screen here. Someone just, I think, has to give me permission. And
oh, you're on now. You can go ahead.
I'm here. Okay, here we go. So this is council approval of mayoral appointees. I'm going to run it as a slideshow here. There we go. So it's a proposed charter change that would allow for council approval of 14 mayoral appointments. Right now, the way the City and County of Denver structure of our government works, we're a strong mayor system. I know you all know that, being part of INC. So the way our charter is written, there are cabinet members, and these 11 cabinet positions are specific positions that are listed in the charter. Our city cannot run without them. There are 11 of them, and the reason there are 11 is because there used to be 10 in the 70s. Excise and license was pulled out from underneath the manager of safety and created its own separate department. And then what's also included in this proposal would be the 3 heads of safety, so police, fire, and sheriff. So these are the positions that would be included. And what the proposal says is that City Council would have approval power of these 14 charter positions. So the mayor would still appoint these positions, but City Council would have the power to approve them. Do other strong mayor cities do this? The answer to that is yes and no. As you can see here in Colorado, there are only 3 strong mayor systems in the state of Colorado: Colorado Springs, Pueblo, and Denver. The Springs and Pueblo already do this. Denver is the only strong mayor system in the state that does not do this. And then if you look and see some of our other sister cities across the country, you can see that the majority of them do this. So it's rooted in best practices in other cities, and it's pretty common. It's not meant to be sort of a major change in any way, shape, or form, but this is a set of guardrails that really ensures that there's transparency and accountability, and really thoughtful conversation when it comes to the people who are running, the 14 biggest positions, charter positions of agencies in our city. So what does the process look like? The mayor chooses the candidate he or she would like to put forward, and then council approves them. So it's a resolution, which means 1 vote, and a 30-day shot clock applies to that. The way it is written into the charter language now, it would go through council on consent unless a council member wanted to call that out. If a council member called it out, then it would go to the committee that the agency was representing. So for example, let's say it was let's see, what's coming up right now? I want to use a real world example. So the fire chief is, right now we have an interim fire chief. We are looking at potentially, who is going to be the next fire chief in the city and county of Denver. So if if our fire chief is not appointed before we get to November 3rd, then, and this is signed into law if it passes, then the fire chief would go through this process. The appointment would go through this process. And so if someone wanted to, if a council member wanted to interview our fire chief, or the person who's up for that appointment, they would call it out. We would go to the safety committee, and then the proposed person would come to safety and have a conversation with council at safety. And, council members would have the opportunity to ask questions there, and just have a conversation with the person who would be up for the appointment, and, be able to ask their questions, be able to have a discussion about whether this person is the right person to be qualified for the job. And then it's just a vote of full council the way it is for any other resolution. The mayor would retain sole dismissal authority. The reason for that is because under our charter, council does not have the power to engage in administrative affairs, and that includes dismissal power. So this resolution calls for a timely manner. The reason it calls for a timely manner of an appointment is because we don't want to get in a situation where there are, 2 years of an empty space. At the same time, and maybe up to a year would be a reasonable time in this day and age for an executive search. If you've ever worked in a corporation and, a CEO search, or if you've worked for a university, a president search could take up to a year, and that's a totally reasonable amount of time. So a reasonable time is a timely manner. It's a term of art, a legal term of art, that is used in courts, and that's why it will be included in our charter. So, we will talk about this kind of specific policies and procedures under what council will use, but these are the kind of major considerations that will be written into the charter. So we did some stakeholder outreach to talk to the community about what the community would like to see and whether this is something that our people would really like to see, our residents in the community. So you can see the voter feedback survey results here. We had about 325 respondents to the survey, which is not a ton, but we did our survey, unfortunately, right as the COVID shutdowns were happening. So it was really hard to get engagement from people at that time. 325 is still statistically relevant across the city and county of Denver. So these numbers are good, but unfortunately, we of course would have liked to have had more participation. But as you can see, the question was, should we refer this to the ballot? And overwhelmingly, yes. The second question was, if we refer it to the ballot, would you support it? And we still had a yes answer. So whether or not people, residents of Denver, felt like they wanted to actually support the bill. They did feel that they wanted the opportunity and the right to vote on it either way. So, which is great news, and that's why it's being referred to the ballot. So, other stakeholder outreach, just so you're all aware, we did a lot of stakeholder outreach, talked to a lot of the unions, talked to every single cabinet member, every person who was holding those positions, offered them briefings, tried to get feedback from the people who are sitting in those positions now on what they felt was appropriate or not. Obviously, talked to the mayor's office about this. And one of the biggest cities that does this is Baltimore. So spent a lot of time talking with their president of council and a gentleman who is actually running for mayor in Baltimore to talk about background research and what this looks like in practice. Baltimore has done it for a very long time, and they have an incredibly wide-reaching range of appointments that they approve, which is not something that we wanted to do here in Denver. That's what they do is actually significantly larger and takes on a much more broader HR role. So, but it's good to know that. So, and stakeholder outreach here, and then just a little bit about kind of pros and cons, right? The big kind of concern here is two things, really. Number one, look, our system has worked for 100 years without this. Why would we do this now? And the answer is because this is something people really want. They are asking for more transparency and accountability from their government. We hear them, and this is a way to provide that is well-reasoned, that is rooted in policy, that is common in other strong mayor cities, that is thoughtful, that is a best practice, that is good governance. The other important thing to remember is that this builds consensus around our heads of safety. So Denver is very different in the way we do this when it comes to our safety departments, right? So we have a manager of safety, and then we have our heads of safety under that manager of safety. They are all appointees of the mayor. And right now the mayor can appoint anyone they want without any guardrails at all. So, this is just sort of a way to build consensus around the idea that was proposed in the fall of an elected sheriff, which Councilwoman Sitabaca had proposed. Denver is one of 2 counties in the state that does not have an elected sheriff. There are many, many reasons why we would potentially not want an elected sheriff. However, there are also many reasons why we would want an elected sheriff. So that is a discussion that has been very thorough, and there are reasons on both sides. This builds consensus in the middle on that. So not having an elected sheriff. However, this is not just a free-for-all appointment. Then there are guardrails and eyes on that process. The concern is deterring qualified candidates. Again, so second major concern, deterring qualified candidates. It's a reasonable fear. Absolutely, right? It's something we need to consider. However, in this day and age, if any of you work in a corporation, a president of your corporation is going to come in, they're going to report to and have to be approved by the board of directors. And that's totally reasonable. This process works in our government on the federal level. This works on the state level. This is, the governor has to do this. This is very common and reasonable. And frankly, if a person is not comfortable coming in and having a conversation with 13 members of city council, then they shouldn't be then they're not comfortable having the job anyway, because as a head of one of the largest agencies and a charter agency of the city of Denver, if you aren't comfortable sitting down and having a conversation with the 13 members of council, you cannot do your job. And I think most importantly, what this does is it creates a collaborative relationship and partnership between council and the agencies, because from the very beginning, then that creates a situation where council and agency heads are working together and have a working relationship, which is important. So with that is it. I want to just, answer any questions you've got, and I want to pull up my website. So let me resume share here. Can I do that? Hold on, I'm going to stop sharing and reshare. So the website is YesOn2E. I will pull it up right now so you can see it. It's just yeson2e.org. You can come and find out more information here. You can read the bill. So all of the language is here available for you to read if you so choose. There are frequently asked questions. There are there's a lot of links to articles that have been written about this process. And it's a relatively simple website, but should answer the vast majority of questions for people. So yeson2e.org. And with that, I will stop talking and answer any questions you've got.
There's a couple of questions or comments and I know, Paul, thank you so much for responding to Adrian. There was, let me see if I can go back to it. I don't know, Adrian, do you have another question or need more clarification?
No, I just was asking about whether essentially this could be weaponized. We've seen this at the federal level where quite a number of recent presidents have had it difficult or impossible to put their people into positions so that they can carry out their program. And I would hate to see that happen at the city level, frankly, because I think one of the things that we really benefit from in this city is diversity of view and a difference of opinion and a diversity between the mayor and the council I see as being a benefit to this city. And we have a separation of powers. This seems to me to militate against that.
Well, I disagree with you. I think that this is a really important process to go through for a lot of different reasons. In a strong mayor system like the one that we have, right now this appointment process doesn't have any guardrails or eyes on it, right? So what it does is it actually allows the mayor's office to do whatever they want for these appointments without any consultation with council at all. So what this does is it actually requires a partnership. It requires collaboration. It requires and creates a system where there has to be some front end back and forth. And that is exactly what you're talking about. It does create that positive working relationship, that back and forth that should be required, that ability and situation where you must build bridges, where you must work together, where you must have consensus. And that's really important, and it doesn't exist right now. And so right now, when we have no consensus building, that can be very divisive. In a situation like this, what's being proposed where consensus building must be part of the process, that can only make our system stronger. And I think that that's the purpose of this.
I just want to add one thing. The board of INC supported putting this on the ballot. So I just wanted to let everybody know, because we agreed that it should be up to the voters to decide whether they approve this charter change. So that's when on the slide that it did say presented at, for the board, that's what it came across. And we did say we supported this going at least to a ballot measure, and so that we all have that opportunity to decide whether we agree with it or not. So I just want to bring that up and let everybody know that. So thank you, Amanda. Does anybody else have any more questions? I don't see any more in the chat. There's a hand, Judy.
Judy? I was wondering what the mayor's office take in that those stakeholder and interviews that you did. I was wondering what the mayor's office, where they stand on it.
They don't support it. For them, it would be easier to be able to do whatever they want without having to be accountable to anyone. And so this puts a set of guardrails and requirements on them that they're not interested in. So they don't support it. There's a new comment. Let me look this up here. Councilwoman Kniech. Councilwoman Kniech, do you have 2 seconds to jump in and talk about your thing before you jump off, or are you jumping off right this second?
Thank you so much, Councilwoman Sawyer. You're very generous this morning. Yeah, 2G is the ballot measure that would allow council to propose mid-year budget changes. Right now, we can only propose amendments in the annual cycle that's in October and November for the following year. The mayor proposes an average of 20 plus changes to the budget throughout the year. These are innocuous things. We're transferring money from a special revenue fund to be used for the thing that it's intended to be used for. Sales tax did a little better than expected, and so we're going to buy a very important blighted property on East Colfax that became available, and we want to make sure that that blighted property becomes an asset to the community. Things that are unexpected that create opportunities. So we cannot propose those mid-year. So that means that if we see a need and the mayor's office doesn't agree that it's a priority, we can't propose that change until the next calendar budget year. So this still requires majority council approval. No one council member can make a rogue change to the budget. You have to get a majority of your colleagues. The mayor can still veto. You need a super majority to override it. We're still subject to all the same fiscal rules. We can't, for example, spend down the reserves for things that aren't allowed to be used. The reserves are for emergencies. They're, very particular rules when you can dig into them and for what. If you're going below 15% or if you're in an emergency to go below 10%. So we're still subject to those same guardrails. So I don't have a website yet. Councilwoman Sawyer is a good inspiration for me to get ahead on that. I've been working on the tax. But anyway, if there are questions folks have, I put my personal email address in the chat there. We can't do advocacy from our city email. So if I can answer questions, I'm happy to. And I know you guys are out of time, but I really appreciate the chance just to let you know that it's coming, 2G. And I believe INC supported this one as well. Is that right? I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I don't remember, but.
Okay, I apologize. I may have misspoken there. I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. I appreciate the presentations. I appreciate you taking your time, both of you, on a Saturday, and thank you for giving the email addresses. So if anybody has questions, that's great. Thank you. I think we'll wait to hear what the mayor's office has to say, correct? The
mayor's office is also not supportive of 2G.
That's what I assumed. Okay. All right. Thank you. Our next presenter, I don't think that Spencer is here, but I think Noah Stout. I think I saw you come up. Noah.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Do you need sharing privileges so you can?
I don't have the PowerPoint. Did Spencer send you the PowerPoint by chance?
I don't think so.
That's fine. I can just talk through.
Okay. So we have Noah, and this is pretty interesting. It's an internet initiative that's also on our ballot. We have so many ballot issues that and as I heard, it's like a 3-pager that's going to be very long. So get your information ahead of time. So go ahead, Noah, and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about this initiative.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone. My name is Noah Stout, and I'm volunteering with the Denver Internet Initiative. And the Denver Internet Initiative would essentially expand, have the opportunity to expand broadband access, so high quality internet access to everyone in Denver. And so in 2005, Colorado passed Senate Bill 152, and that law prevents municipalities from being involved with their own internet. So that means that a municipality can't provide internet, they can't invest in internet infrastructure or create policies to make sure that our internet will be able to meet like our future needs. And so the Denver Internet Initiative, or 2H, would actually opt Denver out of Senate Bill 152, and it would not cost anything. I think there is some information out there that people think that passing 2H would set up municipal broadband or do anything like that. This would be a first step that would allow, essentially would allow Denver to have more flexibility and potentially provide options, in Denver. I believe the number that Denver Public Library provided last year was that nearly 20, and Councilman Cashman, I know you said this in a meeting, but I think nearly 20% of people in Denver do not have access to high quality internet. And so this would actually would cost nothing and would just give the city to have more flexibility around directly addressing broadband. And this is supported by the mayor's office. This is supported by every member of city council, and has many endorsements across the board. And again, would cost nothing and would be a first step the city could take to expand options for all residents. And Councilman Cashman, I feel like I'm speaking about something that I know is very much your baby. So if you want to add anything to that, I'd be happy to turn it over to you.
Oh, sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I'll say a few things. There are three things that you need to be connected to the internet. You need a connection to the internet. You need a device that connects to the internet, and you need to have the knowledge to use the device that connects to the internet. The getting exempt from 152 does not magically solve all these problems, which we saw not only recently in the land of COVID affecting Denver public schools, but Mental Health Center of Denver is struggling to make needed connections for telehealth visits for their people. What getting exempt from 152 does, as Noah said, it simply opens up a broad-based discussion on how do we solve the digital divide, where people in most largely in our traditionally underserved neighborhoods can get the same access to information as people in more fortunate circumstance. You know, since the early days of our country, we've opened the doors of our libraries free to all. In 21st century, the internet is the library of the 21st century. And we've got many hurdles in place that interfere with that open access to information. This is not a beat up on CenturyLink or Comcast. They've done a lot of real good work in our community, but there are these gaps, as Noah said, that still exist. I heard a number today, something like 16 million families worldwide or nationwide don't have access to the internet. So, you know, if you look at, there's about 100 cities in Colorado that have already exempted from 152, a couple dozen counties. And if you look at what they've done, some get the exemption and don't pick up the ball from there. Others get the exemption and initiate a community discussion and end up working with the big dogs, the CenturyLink and the Comcast, and there are other smaller providers to fill those little gaps that remain. Others, I believe Fort Collins, maybe Longmont, I think Centennial as well, have built their own internet system. For me, that would be a last resort. It's an enormous financial investment. But what a lot of people don't know is Denver has more fiber, cable fiber in the ground than most other cities in the country, because all of our traffic lights are connected by cable. So if in the course of this community discussion on how do we fill these gaps, it came that, well, maybe Denver can tap into this line out in Montbello. We would want the flexibility to be able to do that. So I could talk all day about it. This is an easy one in that it does not come with a price tag of any sort. What I envision is if it passes, which they always do, because there's not much reason to not, get exempt from 152. But if it passes, I'm expecting the Denver Internet Initiative or one of the other groups very involved in this topic to initiate that community discussion on how do we connect everybody in Denver. Thank you. I appreciate a couple minutes to speak.
Thank you, Councilman Cashman. And I, Loretta, I'll answer just those two questions in the chat really quickly. To Councilman Cashman's point earlier, this would not provide internet access. Like this would not create the question from Stephen that was asking how could it cost nothing to provide internet access throughout Denver. What Councilman Cashman said, like this would provide flexibility to work with Comcast, CenturyLink, to work with them potentially. They would take additional steps that would go in front of voters, I believe, if you wanted to create like a municipal internet as Longmont and Fort Collins have done. So this would not, the voting on this would not actually do that, but it would provide greater flexibility for Denver. And then the next question I saw was opposition to it and what is it? I think that I could imagine, if maybe you are really satisfied with your internet and everyone that you seem to talk to and work with, or I definitely know that Comcast and CenturyLink would certainly not be thrilled by this. But I can just speak. My wife is a teacher in DPS, and DPS is online right now, and she teaches in an area in the Swansea area, and the number of kids that get kicked off the internet because of a lack of access to high quality internet is normally about half of her students in her class throughout the course of a day. And it is absolutely essential right now. We're expecting people we're expecting people to work from home and to school from home. And, we have 2,000 students in DPS last year that actually do not have a home, and do not have, those students are those students that are not having access to any internet. And there are other places beyond Colorado. Chattanooga is a great example of places that have worked with their school districts and different places to just provide quality options to those who can't afford them, and just make sure that everyone has access to high quality internet. And I want to make sure that I put my email in the chat. I also included a link to the Denver Internet Initiative's website. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me or go to the website for that. So thank you so much for your time. And to Candace's point, this absolutely has huge potential, and we have the infrastructure, and we could absolutely provide greater equity with this. And thank you so much for your support.
Thank you. Thank you. I think, if there are more questions, please put those in the chat, or let me give you his email if you're on the phone. I like it, Stout, STOUT @gmail.com. All right, onward. I don't think we had our August minutes posted, Blair. I don't know that they were posted, so I don't know that we can vote on those right now.
Right. We don't have the votes written into the minutes, so I don't think that we should vote on those.
Okay. All right. All right. Good. Okay. I want to go ahead and go to committee reports. Maggie, since you've been in the background there, I wanted to go ahead and have you go ahead and present on parks first.
Well, this time our presentation, well, of course, will be a Zoom meeting, but we've titled it "The Heat is On," and we're really fortunate. It took a lot of work on Cindy's part to get a person from the Trust for Public Land to come and speak with us. The summer of 2020 was predicted to be the hottest ever recorded, and this report will deal with the importance of parks and open space in order to provide the cooling. I'll read this directly from their brochure. Parks, especially those that are densely wooded and deep green, can counter urban temperatures exacerbated by heat-trapping buildings, pavement, and concrete. Given the increased importance of parks during this public health emergency, the Trust for Public Land analyzed park data from across the country to determine who does and doesn't have access to this vital public resource and uncovered some troubling findings. We'd like you to come to the meeting if you have the time. And if you go out to the website, you'll see the posting on the calendar, which will also give the registration link. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Amy, are you still there? Do you want to present on education?
I think Amy had another commitment this morning.
Okay, so, all right. Joel, do you want to go ahead and go and speak about transportation?
Yeah, certainly. The INC Transportation Committee met this past Thursday over Zoom. We had a 90-minute meeting with almost 30 people there. It's a little bit less than we usually draw, but there were some competing events that night, including the East Area Plan and a couple other things. But it was a good group. The 5 topics we had were an announcement about the Denver Streets for People Summit. I'm going to put information about this in the chat box. It's a multi-day conference coming up next week, pretty inexpensive to attend, about transportation topics. There's local speakers as well as national speakers coming. And of course, the sessions are being held online, but there are also walking and biking tours and things like that to get together with people. And you can find the info, and I'll put this in the chat box at denvercalc.org/summit. We had 2 topics from Dr. Mack, the Denver Regional Mobility and Access Council, that will be of interest, I think, to neighborhoods as information to pass on. One is a travel training program. They just got funding for travel training. Imagine you've got people in your community who would benefit from using transit or knowing about the other options that are out there for getting around, but just haven't been oriented to it, haven't been introduced to it. Travel training is a way. Sometimes it's given at senior centers, sometimes it's given at rec centers. Sometimes there's a family who's struggling to know how to get around, and just having a friendly face orient you can be helpful. So Dr. Mack is doing that program. They also have, I've talked about this over time, the Getting There Guide. So imagine if you have mobility issues of one sort or another, and you don't know what the options are for getting around. The Getting There Guide, which is now in its like 17th edition, it's available in 5 languages, summarizes all the services that are out there that most of us wouldn't know about. And it's only when you need it that all of a sudden you struggle to know what's available. So they gave a presentation not only on the guide, but also on an app that they now have. And you can find that by searching in the App Store on your Android or iPhone for Getting There Guide from Dr. Mack. The 2 larger presentations we had were City of Denver, Dottie, talking about the Transportation Demand Management Program. This is something that you may remember Council talked about a couple of years ago with some controversial changes to parking rules and development, like along Colfax and other places. There was a small lot parking exemption change, and in that the concept of TDM requiring developments to take an active role in promoting transportation alternatives to their office workers or their residents is really taking shape. It's going to be focused on new developments initially, but it's going to be a requirement depending on the size of your development and depending on where it's located in the city, what options are available for transportation in the city. You will be required to have a plan before you can get your certificate of occupancy, and you'll be required to report on it and show that it's meeting the goals of the plan, or else there'll be penalties. So this is a little bit more intentional than even I expected. I was kind of expecting it to be a collection of options, a menu of options to pick from, but really no teeth. So as they're moving forward from this concept into real regulations, we'll be tracking this closely. We did ask the question, what about existing buildings? What about existing developments? That's not their focus right now because they have so much opportunity for requirements with something new, whereas something that already exists, you have less opportunity to then require something that already exists. But the same tools, the same ability to offer knowledge and specific things like eco passes certainly exist for everyone, for all developers. The final topic we had was half an hour with RTD board chair Angie Rivera Malpiedi, and this was really neat because there's the chair of the board of RTD at arguably the most difficult time that RTD's ever had. They already had budget challenges. COVID-19, they have a 40% reduction in ridership. Sales tax is way down, and that's where most of RTD's money comes from. So how are they getting by? And at the same time, a lot of pressure from the state that's been there, because although RTD is an entity created by the state and regulated by the state, there's enough of a disconnect between the people in the legislature or in the executive branch and RTD that they just don't speak the same language. And there's often some sense of, is RTD doing everything they can? Are they being good stewards of their money? So there's a whole, led by the governor and fully supported by Director Rivera Malpiedi, there's a new oversight committee that's happening right now. And she gave us kind of the background of the politics of how that came together and why she's really optimistic about it. So we'll be uploading the video from this session with Maggie's assistance in the next couple days. I just have to edit it a bit to take off the getting started stuff at the beginning, and take a look at that.
Okay, thanks, Joel. We're trying to get Christine on. She's on phone, and I'm hoping she can get on. Are you on, Christine?
I am, but I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Okay, great.
Okay. Ian was on for a while, but he had to run. So I have the zoning and planning report. And as you know, zoning and planning is chock full of many, many issues. So first of all, at our last meeting, we had a presentation by Emmett from Mccullough about his proposals and his ideas on using some innovative land trust models to try to stop the what's going on in Mccullough, which is the buying up of houses by investors and just basically a lot of gentrification. He believes that's next in line. So that was really a useful report that we heard from Emmett on. We also discussed at length a very important committee that CPD has set up called the Affordable Housing Zoning Initiative. And that committee is trying to work out with developers and bankers what kind of incentives they need in order to add more affordable units when they build. And the thing that Ian serves as a representative of Inc. on that committee, and I've substituted for him and been paying attention to that committee. The only issue that the committee members are going to be able to decide is what kind of mix we want to see in the affordable housing zoning incentive. Do we want more 3-bedroom home apartments so more families can be accommodated? Or do we want a much lower AMI rate, so that more families can afford to get into those units? So it's an ongoing discussion, and there's a meeting this Tuesday for people who want to listen in, and I sent it in our last ZAP email. Just one thing about email, if you're not on the zoning and planning email list and you want to try to follow what we're doing on affordable incentives, what we're doing on group living, what we're going to be doing on the residential infill step that's coming up next, many, many issues are coming up. Just send us an email, zoningplanning@denverinc.org, so we can get you on the list. Okay, so I covered last month. It was a good meeting, and it is online if you want to see it. The second thing I want to discuss is the Group Living Advisory Committee and the work that Inc. and ZAP have done for 10 months on that. Many, many of you, I know, sat through zoning and planning meetings both in June and July, and then as delegates, we voted both in July and August to ask the city to split apart the 3 different elements of that proposal. While nothing formal has happened, like CPD has not stated, yes, we will split them apart. For those of you who watched the Land Use Transportation Committee meeting, it became clear that a number of council people have very, very important questions that they asked about many of the issues, and they discussed it for an hour and a half, and the decision was made to come back with Andrew Webb to the next Land Use Transportation meeting, September 29th, and discuss it again. And then on October 6th, Ludi will bring that to an action item as to whether or not it should move on to the full council. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes. This is my guess. I'm not on council, I'm not privy, but my guess is that their city CPD and council members are trying to address the concerns of Montbello with enforcement and address the concerns of Athmar Park that they've raised in terms of the complaint system. And they're trying to address other issues that came up regarding Chapter 59 and the fact that our city is split into 2 completely different zoning codes, some of which is exempt from the group living. So my guess is there's a lot going on that we have no idea what it is. So you need to stay tuned. But what our committee has done, if you recall at the last ZAP meeting and the last delegate meeting, after we voted to debundle the GLAC proposal, there was an additional motion made to set up a working committee that would try to bring diverse opinions on these issues together. As you all know, zoning is completely arbitrary. Picking 6, 8, 4, or 20 people it's an arbitrary decision, and we need to bring people together to try to get some consensus. So that motion to form a committee was passed, and a group that originally was comprised of Tricia Schmidt and Emmett Hobley, myself, and Amy Duclos discussed it at length, and we did a survey to try to see what our members thought. As you know, a total of 35 RNOs responded to the survey. About half of them said, hey, we haven't been able to meet. We haven't even looked at this. We can't take a position. 17 took a position, and 14 were opposed to this as it is now, as it is worded, and 3 were supportive. And there were an additional few RNOs who are members of Inc. that didn't answer the survey, but also submitted letters to the planning board. And I don't know how many of you followed the planning board, but there were over 4,000 submissions to the planning board on this. There was a lot of pushback. It's about 87% of the comments submitted are opposing it. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. What the working committee has done is going to set up 3 different meetings to address the 3 different portions of the group living amendment. And the first one is this Thursday. So we're hoping that neighborhoods will send a representative, their zoning chair or one of the delegates or whoever has been following this, to a constructive discussion to try to arrive at some kind of working compromise that we can present to City Council on this. That would be one of the goals. So I We sent out an email this morning with the link. Please get it to your zoning person. If you're a delegate and you don't really follow this issue, get it to somebody in your group who is following it. Okay, that's the third thing. And then the fourth thing is we have a meeting coming up on September 26th. And we've invited city planning. We're going to have a presentation on Blueprint Denver implementation by Sarah Showalter and David Gaspers. That's first. And I'll tell you what's in that in a second. And the second presentation will be on the neighborhood planning initiative process and how that's going and what lessons we've learned and what we're going to take forward and what issues have been real stumbling blocks. And that presentation will be second. The third part of our meeting will be around the city. So in Sarah Showalter's presentation, I think what she's going to do is touch on all the steps that have been taken on implementation of Blueprint. But we've asked her specifically to talk about the one that's coming up in the next month or two, which is called the residential infill proposal. They just started talking about it at planning board. Abe Barge is in charge, and if you're interested, you can send an email to zoningplanning@denverinc.org and we'll get you in that loop. I think that's all. Let me just check my notes from Ian. Oh, Ian wanted me to make sure that I covered on the housing issue. I know you've heard me say this before, but group living is really not solving housing, and Robin says it and everybody says it. This is really just about changing the household definition and the residential care provisions, but it doesn't build us any new housing. And Ian keeps stressing and has several times that we have to go to the state level and get an inclusionary ordinance passed so that developers are required and we don't have to, give them incentives to do the right thing here. So he's hoping, his goal is for ZAP to discuss this further and maybe take some role at the state level in trying to get that legislation passed if it is introduced. So any questions? I can't see the chat, but if there's questions, maybe Loretta can read them to me.
Loretta, you're on mute.
There's been multiple surveys go out, so I don't know which survey Judy's questioning about. So I think you might want to go and maybe email individually about that, since Christine's only by phone. So you might want to.
What is the question, Loretta? What was the question? I didn't hear it.
Surveys. So
there's been a lot of surveys coming out, and the one that I saw about group living was earlier in the spring, and it wasn't well identified. I thought I was maybe being, sort of co-opted into taking a survey about something. So I wanted to get informed about it beforehand. So
okay, that was not our survey, and I don't know if
then I just missed your survey.
Our surveys were more recent. It was within the last 3 or 4 weeks, and then we spent some time analyzing the results. And then the working committee also went through all of the responses to planning board. And what they discovered is that the 87% kind of paralleled what we were getting from our member organizations on a broader level citywide. But Judy, if you email, I can give you more information.
That would be great.
Okay, great.
Yeah, thanks.
Good. So the other question that we have, so of course, Christine, the last delegate meeting we discussed making sure that renters, those not included in the group living or are members of RNOs or, Black, Indigenous, people of color. So, so the question is, could you start it out with that? So give us a little bit of feedback about what all you've been doing to try and engage other people in community.
Okay, first of all, to be clear, our mission was to stay within INC member RNOs. So I would love to be able to be part of a committee that was recruiting more members from the RNO list. But right now, our mission is limited to the people who are, to the delegates and the RNOs that are members, which is fairly low at this point. I agree, and it needs work. But secondly, we have had participation from people of color, and I think you know that. A couple of people, 3 people from Mccullough have been very active in this on the zoning and planning meetings. We have not, I have not reached out to a renter per se. If they're in our RNO list, they get this as well, and I'm hoping they'll participate in the discussion on Thursday. It's a great opportunity for us to focus on just that first portion. What's wrong with the household definition of, you know, how do we change it to get rid of any connotation that we care about who lives together and get to a place where we can compromise on a number, because as Councilman Cashman pointed out during the Ludi meeting, there really is no cap right now, because there's no cap of square footage. Once you bring 10 people into a 2,600 square feet and all their extended families, you could go well below the square footage goal the city has set. So there's a lot of room to discuss compromise, and that's what I'm hoping people will do.
Okay, well, let's move on, because I think this is a discussion that we've had before. We can keep having, and I think it will continue, because I know a lot of people have been dealing with this for the past 2 years. So, I'd
like to know, Loretta, if you have somebody that you feel has been excluded from this conversation, could you let me know? Who would that be?
Oh, I think there's a lot of people. So,
well, wait a minute. I'd like to know right here, because I haven't heard from them.
Let me get Adrian. Adrian, you have a question?
Yes, I do. I have first an observation. Christine, as you know, I'm one of them. And I'm deeply concerned that by the sound of it, your little subcommittee does not in fact have any representative who are against or are in favour of what the city is doing. And so that is of concern.
Would you like to be on it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you like to?
Yeah, and,
okay.
but I am more concerned, and the neighbourhood that I represent is more concerned, and have expressed that concern now twice in letters to the city and through to INC, that we have a concern that fundamentally is about the what I'm going to characterise as the possibility of INC supporting racist initiatives, or at the least not having an anti-racist approach to particularly zoning issues. And I think that what has happened, particularly recently, but over a long period of time now, is a gradual change in what people define as racism and define as ways to overcome it. And so I think I would like to give notice of the presentation of a motion that we can use to guide us INC, away from any suggestion of racism. And I'm going to put the motion up on the chat.
Well, hold on a second. I am going to take issue with your implication that what ZAP has been working on for 10 months is racist. And if that's what you're accusing me of in a public meeting, I think that needs to stop right now. Lucia did it at a couple of ZAP meetings, and I let it go, and I'm not going to let it go here.
I understand that. I am not accusing you. I am.
Yes, I think you are.
Christine, I am doing the reverse. I am trying to make sure that we all understand that what you are doing is not racist. And what the committee is doing is not racist by defining what that would look like. I am putting up now a motion which I move to facilitate that. And it's on the chat, but I'm going to read it as well. Moved, the Denver Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation, INC, is anti-racist and is against all forms of racism. Accordingly, it is moved that all actions considered by, taken by, or supported by INC shall be clearly shown to have the effect of reducing or eliminating racism. And I appreciate that the appropriate notice has not been given for this motion. And so it is offered for members to take back to their organizations, their registered neighborhood organizations, and preparatory for a vote on this at the next meeting of INC delegates.
Sorry, I took a call. I'm sorry I forgot your name from Inspiration Point. But I want to get another question in from Trupti. You have your hand up. Yeah,
Sorry about that. So I appreciate all the work and I appreciate all the conversation we're having. And I really don't have the what Inc. is doing or not doing. But an observation, and this is from my experience with the R&O as well, and I think it's similar for Inc., and is that we, all of us, I think, struggle with the same thing, which is trying to be representative enough. And I think that is something that I know our R&O suffers with, because we just don't have great tools and possibly engagement of soliciting enough input for an R&O to even reflect its constituents in a sense. And what I would like to not see happen at both the R&O and the Inc. level is that smaller groups, end up representing, yet they're not quite representative. So I don't offer a solution, but it is something that I hope to work on through the executive committee, is either creating or deploying tools for R&Os to be able to solicit feedback. And I get it, maybe only 10 people, respond. However, maybe we should try, and then the processes should be as defensible as possible. Christine, I'm not saying what you guys went through that isn't my point. I think all R&Os, and I think Inc. too, suffers from a lack of representation. And that's something we should be trying to address. And a topic as heavy as this, I would find it really hard for me to speak for 5,000 households, on a 9-person Sunny board. So it's an issue that I think we need to address.
Well, and thank you, Trupti. And I think it's, this is a very important issue to come up, and it's an issue that we in the city of Denver need to address, and we need to talk about, racism, systemic racism, and how things are coming up, and it's finally a time when people can have a voice to speak. And so I think it is a difficult discussion, but I think it's something that we do need to talk about. I want to bring up a couple of things that are in the chat that I want to go back to, and I appreciate it. Says Jane says, Inc. bylaws have reference to what your motion speaks to. We don't need a motion, really. Bylaws are the governing documents. Jason, thank you, Jason, has seconded the anti-racism proposal. I want everybody to go back onto the INC website and look at what we have on there. I think it's something that we all need to make sure that we deal with. And I think, Adrian, you said it's something to take back to neighborhoods. So I think it's something that we could discuss. And again, there's also a comment about getting rid of the de facto redlining in the city. Denver, as you know, was ranked #2 behind San Francisco as one of the largest cities for, sorry, my mind is at a blank. I'm kind of like Robin, but of, you know, we're displacing persons of color in neighborhoods. I know that's happened immensely in my neighborhood since I've lived here. Emmett, thank you, says it's on spot. The proposal is on spot. Yes, redlining is current. Emmett, do you want to, I don't know if you've seen, I know if Ramon was here, she would talk about how redlining, and she's been doing a history of redlining in Denver. And we can still show that redlining is happening in the city of Denver. I see you nodding, Emmett. I don't know if you have anything to add on that, but yes, redlining is currently happening.
Redlining has happened through Denver's history for over 60, 70 years. And we can see through the zoning processes that what has this done to the Black and brown neighborhoods, especially building of the highway to separate the city, all of the industrial racism that is perpetrated in Black and brown communities, all the things that lack of things that have been put in those communities or taken out of those communities. So yeah, zoning has a large part in racist zoning.
And as Jason said, you know, it's the effects of redlining still perpetuate. It affects, and I'll send you all an article if you're interested in it. There's a couple of articles that I've been reading recently about how Denver's redlining has put communities of color in multiple housing units in their neighborhoods and kept single family housing in white neighborhoods. So that's historically been the case throughout the country and in the city of Denver. Additionally, there's some other legal research that I've done recently that kind of also pertains to this, that has directly impacted how you know, families of color and poor families can move forward. And again, we always talk about in Denver is the inverted L, and talk about how those are the communities in Denver, North Denver, West Denver, coming down Southwest Denver. Those are the communities that have been directly impacted, and with not as much housing stock for those communities. So there's been a lot of issues. I mean, this is a big issue to bring up, and I know it's...
So Loretta, I would like to interrupt and suggest that we have a discussion centered on that, because you have given some information that makes it look as if communities of color are not concerned about the group living amendment, are not concerned about possible displacement. The West Side has probably the largest proportion of affordable stock. Much of it is renter owned. There's a lot of problems there. The West Side is actually thinking of doing an overlay, a cultural overlay or a cultural landmark district to prevent displacement and prevent investors from buying up stock.
Which neighborhood? Because we're not all the same. Not all West Denver is the same neighborhood. So what neighborhood are you talking about?
I agree. It's in Torres's district. I think that...
I think there's a couple of overlays, at least on like Northwest Denver, Harkness Heights, which is much further along than we are, and Sunnyside also has one that we're working on, but it is not it is not in front of the city through Amanda Sandoval's office yet. Whereas Harkness...
No, this is a different one. This is a cultural overlay in the Latinx area, and it's basically in Jamie Torres's district. So it's a third one. It's really not an overlay. It's a cultural landmark district, and there was an article I posted on it. There's a number of things we could talk about, and I think they're all very important. The inverted L is not common language unless you're a zoning nerd. So what I would tell people who are listening is being referred to here. It's the whole pathway up the Platte, north and south along the river, which is heavy, heavy industrial, and therefore the neighborhoods adjoining it tend to be the more impacted and the less affluent neighborhoods. And then the inverted L turns east up along I-70, and that entire area is part of the inverted L, and it's kind of become slang for neighborhoods of color, which is in part the case, but not completely. I mean, even Hampton Heights down in the southeast is 20% African American. So I think we have to be very careful about generalizations here, and I would be willing to be part of a forum on that. If Loretta, you would like to set that up, that,
Well,
that could be really interesting.
We'll be working on that, and that's something that we will be working on, and I want to include people of color in that group. That's a big deal for me, to make sure that we have a good representation of a good mix of people across the city of Denver and every community, and try and work to try and get people on each, on various sides of the city. Now, I want to just go back to the chats, and Joel added a good article by a linguist on, sorry, it just somebody else added, on how the word racism has taken a meaningfully broader definition. And if you go into the chat, it's there. And then Lucia added the socioeconomic map and the shape of it. So that is there. Regarding the motion, Adrian, I want to go back to you. I think the motion is on the floor, but I thought we would take this back to neighborhoods. I think that was part of what you wanted to do, correct?
That is correct, with the agreement of my seconder.
Sure. Second.
Could you read it since I can't see it?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, what Joel said was, when this is brought back, I would suggest at the very end, it say something like, quote, eliminating racism and racially disparate impacts. Not everyone has internalized racially disparate outcomes as being racist, as the use of the term is changing. So this may help. And
So wait, are you changing the motion? Are you altering it?
Yes, it's on the floor. But
no, did you just add that? Could you just add that sentence?
Yeah, I would propose to add that make that addition, and we'll do so. And I will submit this motion to INC in written form with that change, again with the approval of the seconder.
Are we still discussing this motion?
My understanding is that it's going back to the RNOs. Isn't that what?
So is the motion withdrawn?
The motion is not withdrawn. The motion is lodged, and as I understand INC's requirements, there has to be notice to the neighbourhoods for any motion, and even if I misunderstand that, I would propose that we provide that, because this is, as Loretta says, and anyone, I think, almost everyone would agree, this is a huge issue, and I think it's very important that INC be crystal clear as to where we stand on racism, and because if we are not, it will be very difficult for at least Baker to remain a member of INC. So yes, I would propose that whatever the term is, that this be tabled for reconsideration at the next INC meeting and voted upon at that time.
And I think, the issue is, this is I mean, so many organizations are coming out against racism at this point in time. You know, and maybe it is in our bylaws, but I think if we make a specific statement, what I'm hearing is you're saying, if we make a specific statement right here and now, then that would at least engender some involvement from people who actually, you know, are disparately impacted, you know, persons of color, and to try and get them to understand that INC takes this position and wants to include them in INC. That's my take on it. Correct?
Correct. One of the things. But more importantly, you know, so if people can understand, it speaks to actions. One of the great criticisms of the whole debate about racism and even anti-racism is that they're words. And as it says in the good book, by their actions ye shall know them. And I think INC clearly needs to be in that position, that by our actions, people can immediately see that we are not a racist organization. We are an anti-racist organization. And I think that I can't imagine that anybody in INC truly believes the reverse. So that's why I want this to be on the record, so that we can all have a clear guideline as to what it means to operate in an anti-racist way.
Trupti, go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree. And I think the taking to the RNOs, I mean, that's going to be an easy sell. I don't think there's anyone who's going to say this is a bad, you know, idea or something. But I think the real work for INC is going to be how we actually do that and demonstrate it. And that's where I think it's going to be very specific, like when there are work groups, we need X, Y, and Z kind of representation. Without that, we should not simply have the conversation. And I think we just need to work harder at that. But yeah, I think taking it to RNOs is probably, I don't think anybody's going to disagree. I'm not, you know, I think we should start thinking about how.
And I do, I mean, I've been working, I have some committee members who I've already defined, Christine, so I have members that are already engaged. And so we do have a subcommittee that's been being formulated. And we have people from a variety of different communities. And I want to engage people. If you know someone who works you know, with communities that are disparately impacted, or if you would like to, you know, send any information, I think I would greatly appreciate that. I want to make sure that that we expand INC. In 20
Okay,
years.
so is this a different group? Is this a working group that you've set up? And what's the name of it? I haven't heard of it.
We're in the works, Christine, and it's been, and it'll come back and we'll talk about it again at the executive committee. So that's a committee that's being formed, and it's been formed, and there's been people who've been engaged. We are also having for next month, I want everybody to know that our next topic, if you didn't hear, I'm working with Tim Lopez. Adrian knows Tim, who's very engaged. I think Gertie, you know Tim, very engaged in the city, and we're a few of us, and I know behind the scenes we're all working. The board and the executive committee, we're working to put a panel together for a community policing. It's called Rethinking. What did we name it? Sorry, I want to make sure I get this correct. Sorry, I want to get it correct. Redefining the police, rethinking community policing, correct? And so we're talking about that, and we want to pull together a panel together, and so that will be a, you know, it'll be a panel to deal with those people who work in law enforcement, those people who work in like mental health, those people who work in other areas around mental health, and how can you make sure that things work more effectively? And so it's a panel to try and deal with all of those issues. It's, we're still pulling that together. So I want to make sure that we have a lot of input. So if anybody has any ideas who could be on the panel, let me know. I have a few suggestions of people, and I know Emmett used to work with the sheriff's department, so I think he might have some contacts, and I think we're working to try and pull some things together to have a very thoughtful presentation, not a one-sided, but a very thoughtful presentation to give perspectives, because we know that just saying we're going to defund the police won't do anything, and that's not what we're talking about. Okay, so I want to make sure people understand what we want to talk about. So sorry, I'm trying to get back and see if there's any other comments. Does anyone have anything else?
Loretta, I would just say if there's any delegate or RNO who is really passionate and wants to help on this subcommittee, please reach out. I can't see the chat, so email zoningplanning@denverinc.org. Because we certainly need help and workers. This is very time consuming. Thank you.
And when is your meeting again? It's this week?
It's Thursday, the 17th, on Zoom from 6:30 to 8:30, and it got sent to delegates, but it's also posted on the INC website, so people can get the link at that location and join, pre-register.
And I just want to add one comment. Joel, thank you. I appreciate the way the language is changing. If one is not actively working to dismantle racism and racially disparate impacts, one is on the side of racism. It's uncomfortable, but it is a really necessary change of perspective. Status quo is racist. Thank you. I know it's not an easy conversation to have, but I think I appreciate that everybody wants to bring this up, and I hope that we can be appropriate and speak, to make sure that everybody is being heard. But I want to make sure, one last thing, can I ask if Greg is still on? I don't think he's still on, so I don't know if anybody else on the board wants.
Yes, I'm here.
You are there, Greg. Thank you. So the last thing I wanted to do, Greg, was just to say, I don't know if you have any reports, and I know I'm forgetting something, and I'm neglectful, so I'm so sorry because I'm trying to facilitate this whole thing. Do you want to go and add where we've done our donations and kind of chime in a little bit?
Yeah, so a quick financial report. We have $24,093 in bank and cash accounts. This year, we've raised $25,210 in income. Most of that was for the awards dinner, where $21,039 was raised. This year to date, our expenses total $51,339.76. However, we have made $25,000 in donations related to COVID-19, $8,000 to Southwest Improvement Council, $7,000 to Denver Metro Emergency Food Network, $5,000 to Struggle of Love Foundation, $3,000 to East Colfax Community Collective, and $2,000 to Mental Health Center of Denver. So that's why our expenses are so far over what we had budgeted, but it was related entirely to the COVID-19 crisis and the feeling that as a community organization, we needed to take action to support nonprofits in Denver. So that's it. Any questions?
Thanks, Greg. I really appreciate it. So I just want to make sure that everyone gets the and it is in the chat. So Adrian, do you want to send that out to us and we could post it on the website? The resolution, I know it's here, but I know some people are by phone. So
Can I
you can email it to me.
I'll just send it to you. Okay.
Okay, that'll work. That'll work. Is there any other new business? I know we had a lot chalked in this meeting, and I'm sorry it was so packed, but a lot of information out there, and I really appreciate the conversation today.
Hey, there's a motion from Greg to table his motion until it can be discussed with RNOs. It's in the chat.
Yeah, so the motion was made, but it did not include discussing it with the RNOs. So I think it's appropriate to table it for right now until it can be fully discussed with RNOs.
Do we want to table it and then it's not a motion pending? So that's my question to you, Paul.
The way the motion is worded, it does anything about tabling it.
Oh, okay.
Is the motion truly a motion to move Adrian's comments to the RNO first and then bring it back for discussion to Inc?
If we want to put that motion out, that would be great. That I think would be helpful. If we had a motion that says neighborhoods will take this, or delegates will take this to their RNOs and have a discussion about it, and so.
All right. Well, I'll put that motion out there for
second.
So wait, the motion? Your motion, Trupti, is then to table it until the delegates can speak to their RNOs, or just until the next INC meeting?
I'm suggesting, or I'm motioning, that this needs to be taken by the delegates to their RNOs and for this to come back next month for discussion by Inc. And then we can actually vote on it itself for Inc.
And it was
I'm in favor of that.
well, it was seconded by someone. Who seconded it?
Jason.
Jason did?
I seconded. Emmett did.
Okay, you both did. Seconded third. Okay. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor? Can you?
Raising hands?
Yeah, can you do a raise your hand in the, down below? And then I'll get a count.
And Blair, I can write up the language, the motion appropriately and share it back with this group. I know we're kind of doing it on the fly here, but I think everybody is good with the sentiment of it going to RNOs first, exactly as Adrian has written it.
Trupti, what I understand and what I'm voting yes on is tabling it to come back next month.
After talking about it with your RNO.
Yeah, at the end of what you said that made me say, yes, this is the right motion to vote for, was it's coming back next month.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
And just to remind everybody, go to your participants and raise your hand.
And I see Timothy McHugh, I guess your neighborhood is after the next INC meeting. I'm wondering if there's any way to, we do have a function of SurveyMonkey for members of INC. I don't know if that would help anything. I don't know. I mean, it's better to have it as a discussion. I understand that. So.
I have 17 yeses.
I think you can add 18 on there. Do we have that? And I'm not getting, well, okay. All right, and then all those opposed, can you please raise your hands? All those who are, lower your hand if you've already voted yes. So I'm going to ask for the no votes. So everyone lower your hand if you were a yes vote, please. Right, I think I have everybody lowered. Okay, those of you opposed to this, taking it back to your RNO, please raise your hand. I'll give you a minute to vote. I think we had a couple voted yes, but they weren't able. So,
I have 24 based on the chat.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I don't see any no votes. No votes. Okay. Is there any abstentions? Please raise your hand for abstentions. Any abstentions? Please raise your hands.
I see two.
Ooh, I see two. Okay. All right. So Blair, what did you say? 24 yes, no?
Yep, 24 yes, 0 no, 2 abstain.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I think what we may also do is put that on the website at least to make sure that everybody sees it there and you can take that discussion back to your RNO. You know, we're over time for our meeting today, but I really appreciate the discussion today. Greg? Sorry, you're breaking up, Greg. Greg, are you there? I can tell it's him.
No, I don't have anything to say.
Okay.
Sorry.
I thought it was you. Okay. Anybody else have anything else?
Wonderful meeting, Loretta. Thank you so very much for keeping us all on track. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Still
thank
went
you.
a little over, but thank you. And I appreciate you know, the input that everybody has, and I appreciate the open discussion. If there's anything else we can do, let us know. And again, neighborhoods work better when we work together, right? All right, take care. Have a good Saturday afternoon. Enjoy the sunshine. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.